Hello guys, so today we're going to talk about why Latin America feels more African than UK. Well, you have areas in Latin America such as Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela. You also have places such as Dominican Republic, Cuba as well, where they all have large black populations. These are the main countries that I would say have a large African population. I've seen so many YouTubers talk about all these South American countries, and two words come to mind: mulatto and black. So mulatto people is basically like mixed race people, people who have a mixed kind of complex, and you've also got black people in Brazil. So most of these Afro-Latinos, they all come from West Africa. You know, they all have West African roots, and most of the time they were descendants of slaves that were coming from West Africa. There's this particular area in Brazil called Salvador. They have a larger black population. So that's why you're going to see most of those people are more dark skinned. You know, they have lots of mixed race people there as well. And this is actually because there's always been a link between Salvador and, you know, slavery in Brazil as well. So that's why you see a lot of those things happening there. Even though I've not been to Latin America, I've been to places near South America. So I've been to Aruba and I've been to Curacao, and those two places are actually islands in the Caribbean, and they border countries like Venezuela, and Venezuela is a South American country. During my visit to Aruba, I would talk to different people. So what I've noticed is that people in places like Aruba and Curacao, they have a lot of people that migrate from South America to go and work in, let's say, Aruba and Curacao. So they work in the tourism section. Particularly, I met this girl, you know, she was, let's say she was okay. She wasn't, you know, she was quite decent looking. So I met this girl and she's actually from Suriname. So Suriname is actually another country that I've never, before that, I never even knew where Suriname was. I was just thinking, oh wait, where's Suriname? So then I searched it up and I found out that it was actually in South America near Brazil. So I was like, okay, cool. Let me just find out what this country is about. So then I realized that country also has a large black population there as well. So I was like, okay, cool. Let me just do more research into what the connection is between Latin America and, you know, West Africa and other parts of Africa, because I was just curious to find out why is there so many people that look like me living in South America. Okay, so then obviously the following day, you know, I talked to her in the reception, and before that I did my research on Suriname, and all I was hearing was bad news about the country, how the country is just bad and it's so, crime is everywhere there. So then I was like, okay, cool, let me talk to her and see what's up, you know, see what her thoughts is on her country. So then she said the country's a nice country, but it's still a bit corrupt and there's crime. So I was like, okay, cool. And then she started telling me how it was a struggle there and how people are always trying to, you know, survive, and how it's really difficult to make a living there. You know, people are having to be creative because there's not a lot of resources for them out there. So I was like, okay, cool. This is how Suriname actually is. And this actually reminded me of, you know, Africa, you know, in terms of all the African countries, wherever you go in Africa. Like, for example, when I went to Kenya, when I went to even Morocco, places like Morocco, there was not a lot of resources. I went to this restaurant, right, in Kenya. It was a really nice restaurant. We had some of the local food, like ugali, and we had yamachoma as well. And I was looking at the restaurant, and the restaurant was made with like wood, and they had like carvings on it, and it was nicely decorated. And the place they used to cook was like, they've put like different types of wood to make the place. I was like, rah, these people from Africa are really creative. So that kind of links to the point of trying to be creative with little that you have. Like, that's how the African culture is. Like, even with the little that we have to be creative. In the UK, we have all these resources, but then we don't want to do anything. We just want to sit at home, work our normal 9-to-5 job, and we're okay. Wow, these people in South America, Africa, you know, all these places, they're having to work constantly to get by. And the little money that they have, they would give it to their parents or their family members or someone that's close to them. So then they'll work hard, and with that money that they have, they would send it to their parents to say, thank you, mom, thank you, dad, for being there for me. You know, that's just the African way. But then, whereas in the UK, people are just being stingy. I'm seeing people, even the people that I know, they're stingy to give their parents money. They don't want to give their parents money, family members money. They don't want to give anybody money. They just want to keep the money to themselves and just be selfish in a way. So I don't understand why people are like that here. I'm not saying everybody's like that. The people in South America, for example, do you think they would just be working just like that? No, no. They would work, and they would use that money for good use. Whether it's giving it to their family or giving it to their family members. Whereas in the UK, people can earn like £10 an hour. Let's say they've worked for the whole day, and that whole day they will just waste it on going to a concert 5 times a year, or they would waste it on going on holiday 5 holidays a year. Whereas some people in Latin America, some people in Africa, they don't really have the luxury to be going out on five holidays a year. So then they have to be creative with the money that they have. You know what I'm trying to say? Whereas here, we just take money for granted. We'll just throw our money away like it's nothing. Just throw it away. Most of the people, especially most of my African aunties and uncles out there, they would always be telling me, Emmanuel, save your money. Don't waste your money. Save your money. Save your money. And I was like, why are they saying that? Why are they saying that? And I was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, because I think it's just personally, I think it's just part of the African way of thinking, to save your money and not waste it. Even when I was trying to go to university, right? I was trying to go to university and I was like, Mom, I want to go. I want to live there. I want to live there. And then she was like, Emmanuel, save your money. Save your money. And then now I was like, okay, cool. I know what she's trying to say. And now I knew what she was trying to say. So I think it's just the African way of thinking. Also, what I've noticed is that in Latin America, right, from what I've seen, from the people that I know that have migrated to Aruba, Curacao from South America, what I've noticed is that they tend to not be so disrespectful. What do I mean by this? So they tend to not talk back to people. You know, they don't talk back to the elders. They might be working, and if someone's telling them what to do, they're not going to be like, you know, they're going to be like, okay, cool. And then they'll go about their business. So they don't really talk back to anybody. But here in the UK, I could literally be walking down the street here in the UK, and someone would just be like, do this, do that. Like, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but just the ones that I've come across, you know, they're just like, they're so aggressive and they're so hostile to people that they don't even know. That's why sometimes when people from, you know, that come from West Africa and other parts of Africa, some of the people that I know that have come from West Africa and from especially other parts of Africa, when they come to the UK, that sense of culture that they've learned back in Africa is gone. It's non-existent. Because when they come here, they start adopting their culture of talking back to people, of, you know, just not trying to know like when to respect people. Like, okay, cool, I see an elderly walking on the street, let me just make sure he's okay. You know, people don't really do that here. Like, for example, like they'll just pretend like they're not even there. That's why when people say, oh yeah, I was previously living in Africa for a couple of years. So from when I was born, I was living in Africa, and then I came to live in the UK, and I've lived in the UK for about like 10 years. When they say that, I'm like, okay, cool. They might have lost a bit of the culture that they've been taught when growing up in Africa. Because it happens. When they come here, they forget their culture from Africa, from Latin America, wherever they came from. They just forget everything, and then it's like they're a completely different person to what they were back home. So the question is, does Latin America still hold on to the African culture compared to the UK? Yes, because let's say for example, Brazil. You have a large black population in Brazil that were descendants of slaves that came from West Africa. So if you think about it, obviously they will bring along their traditions and their values from West Africa into Brazil. That's why you see all these like ceremonies and events that happen in Brazil, and the same thing happened in some African countries as well. So they still hold on to their African culture and values. Whereas UK, someone could be living in, let's say, Nigeria for 10 years. They could have been born there and lived there their whole life. And then they come to UK, live there for 10 years. And then some of that culture is gonna vanish. It's gonna disappear. So if you like this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button, like and comment. Peace.